Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we are going to be taking a look and installing a Curt universal trailer wiring on a 2018 Ford EcoSport. Now this isn't a plug and play per se, so there's a little bit of splicing involved, but I'm going to show you how to do it. Here we have our 4-pole hanging off from its dust cap on our hitch. Now this is a necessity if you plan on ever towing a trailer. And what this does, this is going to send the signals from your vehicle, whether it be your running lights, your brake lights, or turn signals, and transmit them to your trailer. And what that's going to do is let the people behind you know what you're doing, and that's going to keep you safe and legal. Now this customer chose to have this on the outside of the vehicle, which is totally fine. And if you want to permanently mount it with brackets, we have those available at eTrailer. Otherwise, the dust cap that's included with it is really nice because it keeps your contacts here nice and clean for when you're ready to use it, but it also keeps this in place. Now you can also choose to have this live inside the vehicle, and whenever you need to tow, you simply drop it out underneath your rear door here, and you can hook up all the same. Now this is module protected, meaning any short that's going to happen is going to protect your vehicle from getting hurt in the process. So if there is some sort of electrical issue, whether it be in the trailer or the wiring, your car is not going to have any issues from it. Now, as far as the installation goes, it's not too bad. This is a universal kit, whereas a lot of them are plug and play and they simply go into the adapters. But if you're fairly confident with a set of butt connectors and some wire crimps, we'll be fine. And I'm going to show you how to do it. To begin our installation, we're going to be needing to get to our taillights. So we'll go ahead and open this up. And Ford has done a pretty nice job of making these pretty accessible for us. So you're going to see there's interior panels on both sides. On the passenger side, you're just going to simply push this back and this tab comes open. Now this can actually come out if you need it to, but there should be a white plastic. And it's a knob that has, I'll show you the end once I pull this out. This side is, the passenger side is only going to have one because it does have Torx bits on it, but the driver's side does have two, and it's going to be similar to this with that panel. So it may take a little bit of turning. Make sure you don't drop these, because if they fall in, you're going to have to hunt them out, but they're going to look like that. So you can see there's two on the driver's side, and those are going to come out the same way. Now on our passenger side, you're going to have two T25 screws here. The driver's side does not have that because of the way that the door opens up. So go ahead and remove those. And you're going to want to keep hold of all your hardware that you remove, and that way you have it when you put it back on. Now once those two are out, the taillight should simply slide out. You may have to give it a quick bump, but you're going to see this is kind of what we're gaining access to is our plug. And we're going to be tying into these since this is custom. They unfortunately don't have a wiring kit specifically for the EcoSport, so we'll be splicing into this. So we'll go ahead and remove the plug and we'll pull back some of the sheathing here. So you can see the two tabs there. You're going to push right in the center there and this should come out. Now set your taillight in a safe spot because we'll be reinstalling it later, obviously. Now on the driver's side, I'm just kind of giving myself a little bit of finger space here, standing against the door so it doesn't open up and pinch my fingers. But same thing, kind of push that forward, and you're going to have your plug. Go ahead and remove the plug. At this point, I like to pull the harness out and kind of lay it out just so I kind of know where it's going to go. Now this customer is going to run their 4-pole out. So underneath the vehicle, there is a grommet, but it's going to stay on the same side as the module, which is going to be on the driver's side. So let's kind of lay out these wires. So we have our 4-pole. We have our 4 wires here together that are going to be white, brown, yellow, and red. And they're actually going to say what they're supposed to be on the module, which is pretty nice. Now I've gone ahead and labeled them just to make it easy for myself, and that way I'm not messing it up. Black wire is going to be our power wire, and that's going to attach to our loom of black wire and run it up to the battery. And then we have our green wire here, which is going to go to the passenger side and tie into that turn signal. So the module is going to need to live on the driver's side here, and we're going to want to mount it up somewhere. We're also going to have to drill a ground screw, which is the white wire off of my previous label. So What we'll probably need to do, I've simply pulled the harnesses, the taillight harnesses in, and that way I can kind of work in them. But we're going to pull this off and gain a little bit more access so we can mount up our module. To gain access, we're going to pull out our cargo cover here. You're also going to have one more. Let's set these aside. Now, as far as the spare tools, you could probably leave those in there, but we're going to be pulling out this center garnish here, and you're going to see there's 3 little plugs, 1, 2, 3, and there's also clips up top. So the way that this works, you're going to want to kind of just pry these out with your fingers, and they may pop out, they may stay in the plastic, but either way, just make sure you hold on to them. And then once you kind of have all 3 of those out, you can lift up on one side, and it should pop. Again, hold on to these. Now, you don't have to completely remove this. In fact, it is plugged over here. So be careful that you're not yanking too hard when you get to the passenger side. But this will be enough space for us to get it out of the way because we're trying to gain access here. So this is pretty simple. We just peel this weather stripping seal back, and just enough. There is a plug up here as well, and if you pry behind it and pop it, you can see it right there, and that should be enough for us to gain access to not only mount our module, but since we're running the 4-pole down, we're going to be using this grommet that's tucked down there. And the green passenger wire, we're going to be putting underneath this center threshold to get that clean over to our passenger taillight. So if you're not planning on running your 4-pole outside, that's totally fine. You'll still want to do this step so you can kind of run it clean here and ready to use when you need to tow. So we're going to want to make sure that we have our power wire run up so we can attach that, and also our full 4-pole ran down through this grommet. So it's going to be pretty easy. You just kind of grab the end and pull it up. So what we're going to do is be cutting a slit here. So you want a razor knife or a nice sharp pair of scissors, and you're going to want to just cut a nice clean edge there, and that way we can run our power wires and our 4-pole through there. I'm just using my snips here, making sure I don't get the wires, but also cutting it enough to where I can get this grommet out. Now the grommet is kind of wrapped into part of that wiring harness, so you may need to cut a little extra snip on it, but we'll be going back with black silicone, and that way we can actually get this water sealed back up. Now, if you're not running your 4-pole, you're still gonna have to run your power wire up, but you'll be able to just simply poke a little hole here using either a sharp tiny screwdriver, or if you have a pick, you can run that through and run your power wire up, and you should be fine. You wouldn't have to cut this. Here I have my power wire ran up, so I can go ahead and splice this and attach it to the power wire here on the module. If you have a little bit extra, again, you want to lay this out, maybe make sure that you can reach all the way to your battery, but the good thing is, being a smaller car, you should have no problem. So I'm going to leave a little bit extra, and that way if I need to, I can always zip up the rest, but that's going to give me room to kind of move around and make sure that I'm not pulling on any other plugs when trying to mount this. And we're going to use our supplied butt connector that came in the kit. Once you crimp those both down, give it a quick tug, make sure it's connected properly. And now we're able to put this back here, and we can route this wire up, and that way we can actually start splicing into this. Now, we do need to be careful just because these wires are pretty fragile and pretty thin, and we also don't want to put too much strain on it because we'll still have to plug it into the tail light. So go ahead, route this up if you want. If you're running your 4-pole outside, you can route this through where the grommet hole was. For keeping it inside, no worries. And then from there, we'll be running our green wire. But for now, let's get this module in a nice little spot. Now, since this doesn't have a plug-in to the OEM style clip, you're going to need to test to figure out which wire you're going to splice into. Now, it does come with this handy light, and simply you clip this alligator clip onto a bare metal spot, whether it be the actual latch from the door can work. Anything that you can bite onto that's raw metal, that's part of the chassis. And what you'll do is you'll turn the lights on, and you're going to be checking for your different lights. So you'll do your running lights, and it should stay solid. Mark that wire. The next one you'll do is going to be your brake light, and your turn signal will be nice and easy because that one will be blinking. So denote which ones you have. I've gone ahead and done that, and I've made some nice notes. So as we can see, our purple and green, that's going to be our running lights. Gray with orange is turn signals. Your white with green, I believe, is going to be your brake. Your passenger side, you're only tying into one, and that's going to be green with orange. So I've gone ahead and tested that. If you want to do that on your own just to double check mine, you can go ahead and do that, but hopefully I saved you a little bit of time. Now before I splice into this, this has to still go to the tail light, and I want to make sure that I have plenty of room. That way I'm not attaching this and then this doesn't reach the tail light. So I'm going to go ahead and peel this electrical tape back, and we can tie back pretty far. Not only is that going to help us gain more access to plug into the tail light, but also this wire here, once we have it attached to all this, we're going to be moving that module down a little bit, and that's going to gain us more wire heading over to the passenger side, because as I lay it out, I do see it's pretty tight. So hopefully this will help us. All right, so with this dialed back, we're going to separate these out a little. And so purple with green, that's going to be our running light. And so looking at what I have here, we have our turn signal. This is my brake, and this is my tail light or my running light. So we're going to splice into this. Now included are these little splicing. So if you've never used these before, you might want to get some dielectric grease and fill these up. That's going to help make sure the contacts are good. But essentially you have one side that's capped, and that's going to go with our wire from the wiring harness. And this other one is simply going to pop in there. But before I do that, I take a little bit of dielectric, run that in there. If you don't have dielectric grease, we actually sell it here at eTrailer. And this is an important step. It kind of gives it a little bit of insulation. It's going to make a lot better contact. That way during bumps or whatever on the road, it's not going to cause any issues if the contact is not great. This kind of fills that void. So we put our brown wire on that cap side, and then we'll lay this out. So this is going to be tying into that brake light. So I'm going to move this down as far as I can here. And this wire is simply going to feed in here. Make sure it's in that gap completely. Make sure that brown is also there completely. And once you know that you're good, you can take a set of pliers and crimp this down. That metal should go down, biting into the wires. And then once you do that, make sure it's good all through. Let me get a little better bite on the backside here. You can cap this down, and that's going to hold that in place. So we're going to go ahead and do that with our other wires, and I'll show you that once we have it all set up. Okay, so now you can see it all tied together here. I have my red wire going to my green and white. So that's going to be my brake. And then I have my brown wire here, and that's going to be running to my purple and green, which that's going to be my running lights. And then I have my yellow down here, and that's going to the gray and orange. So that's going to be my turn signal on the driver's side. So I have all three of these clipped, snipped in. I'm going to actually run a little bit of electrical tape just to kind of keep these in place and not stress on this. And then from there, once that's taped up, we can run this out to where our taillight will live. And then the rest of the slack we can kind of pull down with the module, not putting too much stress on this. My spliced wires, once I have them taped up, I fed those out. That way we'll be able to plug in the actual taillights. Now, the rest of the wire, I've actually pulled this down to make sure that we have enough room to run the rest of our wires, and it's just going to be making it easier for mounting. So our white wire, if you need to, you can peel this back a little bit, but we're going to need to ground this. And so any spot that's on the frame here should be fine. So we'll go ahead and run our self-tapper through. Now your ring terminal here, there is a flat side. Make sure that is obviously facing the middle. And just tight enough to where that's not going to move. So now what we have left is mounting our module. Now this can be mounted in a bunch of different ways. You have a hole here you could use a self-tapper if you really wanted to. There's double-sided tape. I'm gonna find a nice spot and I'm gonna zip tie it in place. I'm thinking under here it should be just fine. So I can route this under, use this hole for a zip tie, and if you really want to, you could put the double-sided tape and find the flat surface down here and stick that in. Main thing is just so it's not moving while you're driving around. Now you can see here I had to add a little bit of extra wire. I tried my best to give us enough slack to make this work, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. So I've taken a butt connector and connected extra wire. Now if you don't have extra wire, you can actually get some of that here at eTrailer and really only need a couple foot to extend it, but it's gonna make me happier knowing that the wire's not stressed by being pulled. So what I did here is this insulation, I went pretty far back on it and I cut that back. And the wire that you're looking for, the turn signal, is going to be the green and orange. So green and orange goes to that, and we still have a decent run to be able to get our taillight plugged in. So this can feed out to where our taillight will be, and the rest of this I'll be tucking it up. So now I'm going to tuck this out of the way. There's going to be a little bit of extra, obviously, so I can coil this up and zip tie it to something in here, but it really is going to live behind this. You'll never really see it. And then this wire is actually going to live kind of in this plastic. So again, you're not going to see it, but when you do route it, you're going to want to make sure that it kind of is under here, and that's going to keep it in place, but also not in the way of putting our clips back in. So I'm going to go ahead and route this up, and then we'll take a look at the power wire and how we ran that. So behind on the driver's side here, you can see how the module actually mounted up. I just used double-sided tape and it kind of slips in there. It's not going to be moving anywhere. Now, I put my grommet back in place. I did have to cut a little hole to put this back, and I ran my 4-wire, and you can see our power wire there. And I'm going to go back and put some black silicone once I'm done running my power wire, and that's just going to kind of seal that up. Now underneath the vehicle, I'm going to have my power wire and my 4-pole. My 4-pole is going to generally be where I want to be towing. So we're going to be hanging this. We have a dust cap that goes on here, but I want these wires tucked up so they're not dragging or hitting anything on the road. Your main goal when running power or any electrical underneath the vehicle is to stay away from any moving parts and hot parts, so like exhausts or axles. Luckily on this EcoSport, it's pretty wide open under here, so it should be pretty easy to do. And what I'm going to do is actually tuck this on top of the hitch here, and I'll be zip tying this up into place. And then the excess cable can actually kind of hang down here. And then we'll be able to attach it right there with our dust cover, and it'll be ready to go whenever we need to tow it. Now, the power wire fed through our grommet here, I've ran. And what I did is I really tried my best to follow a lot of the factory wires. Most of them are in wire looms, and they run in channels that are going to keep it nice and safe. So you can kind of see the way that I routed. And you can do it whichever way you really find best. But again, trying to use the factory points really makes a big difference. So once I got past the fuel tank, it's nice and easy. But getting over that was a little bit tricky. So this is when I use the factory clips, and I just kind of set those on top of the other lines here and zip tied them up every a couple inches just to make sure that they're in place. And then once you get to the engine bay, this is where it can get a little bit tricky. And what I end up using is we have airline, and you can kind of use anything that's, you know, a wire hanger, you can use string, you can use whatever, but pretty much what you're gonna be doing is fishing that down here the way that you'd want that wire to run. And again, you're trying to stay away from any suspension. The steering here is all in, you know, it's covered, so that's good. But really just trying to keep it up against the inside fender here up to the battery. And so once you run that down, you can use that wire up top to pull it through. Okay, so now we're going to be connecting to our power. So in the EcoSport, you just simply lift this and we have our power here. So in order to attach our power wire to that, we're gonna first need to put a fuse holder in place, and that's going to protect it just in case we have a power surge. It's going to go to that fuse and not destroy our vehicle. So this is my wire that I fished up using my air tube or any pull wire that you have. And the way I routed that is really trying to keep on the inside here. I tucked it behind this little panel here by the battery, but mainly just trying to run it up close to it and not making contact with anything else that might be moving or hot, like the exhaust. So what we'll do here with our power wire is splice this end. From here we have our fuse holder. Now you're gonna see the fuse is not in there. Don't put that in until we are actually hooked up to power. So we will take our supplied butt connector and we're gonna go ahead and crimp this down. In fact, I'm gonna do this on my power wire first. And then our fuse holder, it's gonna have to attach to it. So try to find a nice clean spot that you can mount it. Still accessible to the fuse if you need to. So I think I can route it this way and it should sit in this gap okay. So we'll put the other side in. Now you're gonna see on the other end of the fuse holder, there is a nice little splice already kind of done there for you. And that is going to get our ring terminal. That is also supplied in the kit. So we'll go ahead and place that on, and that's gonna allow us to connect to this little terminal post here. And go ahead and double check all your connections. See, that's why. So we'll get a better crimp on this here. But do that with all your crimps. You want to make sure that you're not having a loose connection later on, because troubleshooting it can be tricky. So I'm actually going to grab a different ring terminal. This one's not seeming to like me. Now we're going to go ahead and check our connection. And that looks good. So next we need to take a 10mm and we're going to take off this little nut here that's on the battery. So now we can place our ring terminal on our post and tighten this back up. Now we're also going to want to make sure that this top cap actually closes back down. So we're going to find a nice spot. And if we need to, we can always trim it, but we might have to notch out just a small little spot. If you're particular, you could probably make this work here like that. So again, if you want to, you can throw just a little notch in there to allow space for that wire. Now we're going to go ahead and put our taillights back in place. Now, same steps as we did, but in reverse order. When we removed them, passenger side is only going to have one of these, so that's going to make it a little bit easier to remember which one goes where. Clip that in, and this little tab is going to slide into here. But the best way to do that is really just make sure it's kind of flush against the side, and the pins are going to align, and you're going to see all those gaps kind of closing up. So you can go ahead and put these on. I'm not going to go and tighten everything down as far as all of our other Torx bits yet. I want to make sure it's all working. That way you're not putting everything back only to find out that you have a loose wire or something along those lines. So just going to get this in place. We'll go ahead and do the same on the driver's side. With a ring terminal now tightened down, really all that's left is to put our fuse in and test to make sure it works. So go ahead, put your fuse in. Put your cap on top. And now we're going to go check to make sure it works. Now, again, before we put all of our plastic back in place, we're going to want to make sure that this is working properly. So the way to do that, we actually have a 4-pole tester here. You can get these at eTrailer, and these are really great because it actually keeps it specific to the vehicle. A lot of other times when you test your 4-pole, you have to hook it up to your trailer. And if your trailer's having issues, then it's going to give you a false negative on your wiring here. So having something as simple as this is really a good quick check. Plus you don't have to hook it up to a trailer for it to work. Now these lights here are going to correspond with our running lights, our brake lights, and our turn signals. So I'm going to run through and we'll see how they work. So now I'm going to run it through the light cycle here, starting off with running lights. Next, I'm going to do the left turn signal, the right turn signal, and then finally the brake lights. Now with everything working properly, we can go ahead and get all of our interior panels back in place. And also something I did for a nice little finishing touch is I had some extra wire loom. I added that, and that way you're not going to see those colored wires hanging down, and it looks pretty clean and tucked up there. And that was a look at the Curt Universal Trailer Wiring Kit on a 2018 Ford EcoSport.